This is Karl Dakin. This is the funding live stream show on LinkedIn. Welcome to today's program. For those of you who are new to the program, essentially what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about funding, and hopefully my guest will be here soon to join us, and we'll dive in deep on the topic of crowdfunding as a means of getting access to small businesses and micro businesses, and in some ways, more importantly, opening up the capital industry to people who ordinarily don't get to participate, who, for one reason or another, are outside the scope of what is considered capital industry today. So, looking forward to having our guest, and there he is. Good morning, Tom Bassford.
Karl, thanks for having me.
Yes. So, what we do on this show, heads up for everybody who's new and for Tom, who's a guest for the first time on the show, and I hope to have him back again later. This is on LinkedIn Live. It's live streaming. So that means when I screw up, everybody gets to see it. So this is what we call authenticity and in its finest form. And we have this being live streamed to LinkedIn, Facebook, and what's that other one out there? But anyway, anyone who wants to participate can go onto LinkedIn right now on my LinkedIn Live profile page, and they can enter a question about what we're talking about today, make a comment, let us know that you're listening and what your interests are today. So active audience participation is always invited. And with that, I'm going to do a quick introduction here of Tom. And Tom and I have known each other for a while. He's based in Kansas City, and he is working with a brand new Reg CF crowdfunding platform. And crowdfunding is the topic for today. And more specifically, we're going to talk a little bit more about audiences and who the crowds are and building crowds and everything like that. But I'm going to let Tom talk about himself, how he managed to talk himself into doing this, what gets him up this morning to be a guest on my show and to run and operate a crowdfunding platform. And then I want to get into everything about EquityVest and how they're different and why they're different. And some people would say why they're better. I think Tom would say that. So, Tom, good morning. How are you
Right.
doing this morning?
Very good, thank you. Good to be with you.
So let's just start with who's Tom Bassford, and then we'll work our way up into more difficult questions.
Sure. Tom Bassford. I spent the early part of my life, really the first 32 years of my adult life as a pastor. So that's my training, that's my background. And I think if, I read this of somebody that I have a lot of respect for. My problem has never been that I believe too little. I tend to believe too much. And so, when I read certain things about maybe how the world ought to be or how we ought to be in this world and those sort of things, um, I have a tendency to believe that the best in us is possible if we're willing to bring the resources of our world to bear upon those things. And so throughout my pastoral work, of course, we were involved, like most churches, in what the church calls mission work. And little by little over time, that work was always very meaningful to me. So whether it was in this country or around the world, but something began to nag at me in the midst of the good that we were doing and that other churches were doing through their charitable work. It began to really dawn on me that we weren't changing the underlying circumstances, which in most cases is poverty. Some poverty has, it's not just about the amount of money you do or don't make in a day. I mean, at the very root of it, if you look at it around the world, people are trapped in poverty because they lack access to networks of exchange, such as capital. Because the percentage of entrepreneurs, even in the context of the most abject poverty, is very similar. It's always somewhere around 10%. But when a whole ecosystem is locked out of access to networks of exchange, regulations, in this case, we're talking about EquityVest, crowdfunding, capital, then that whole ecosystem is trapped in that space there. Now, I never thought this way as I was pastoring, but I began to be frustrated over the fact that much of our charitable good created a good kind of a feel good situation, but we didn't change anything. So about 20 years ago, I stepped out of the pulpit and started a not-for-profit called Significant Matters that has been focused now almost 20 years on helping the faith-based world think and develop strategies by which they can channel their charitable instincts and their charitable giving towards things that could create more sustainable solutions. I'm not suggesting that there's no room for food kitchens or closed pantries and those kinds of things. I think we need less of those things, but that's another conversation there. What I believe is that there's a whole space within the world of Christian charity that has yet to think about how we might direct capital or access to capital or work to make access of capital available, and then various other things in there. So anyhow, we do a lot of work with churches in terms of consulting and training and this and that and the other. COVID hit, and so much of what we were doing with churches had to shut down. And I was sitting around twiddling my thumbs, and somebody said, "Have you ever heard about regulation crowdfunding?" Nope, never heard of it. Is it Kiva? No, it's not Kiva. Is it GoFundMe? No, it's not GoFundMe. You really ought to look at it. It's kind of a niche-based sort of a thing, and but it's a real security. It's an equity. It's taking, well, I didn't know anything about it, but I thought, how hard could that be? So we,
Sorry, but I'm
yeah,
about
and
as
so,
sensitive to that question as anybody. So,
but again, going back to what I said early on, if I've never struggled with believing too little. If anything, my belief in a great big God and those kinds of things has said to me, well, wait a minute, if this is legit, then why can't it be a tool in the hands of faith-driven people, the church, and that kind of stuff, to make this world a better place, to kind of put hands and feet on the things that we believe. So we embarked on this rather ambitious journey to create a Reg CF portal in which our goal would be to mobilize the faith-driven community to utilize this tool to do three things in particular. One is we are unapologetically capitalists, and we believe that for all of its problems, it is still the best way to lift people out of poverty, and that the problem is, how do we make that capital access that capital available to more marginalized group? Reg CF to me is an ideal opportunity to do that. So our mission is to use business as a way to create a more free and virtuous society. We're saying to those who claim to have a faith-driven motive, then start businesses that prioritize all of your stakeholders, not just your shareholders. Care about the people that work for you. Demonstrate that in the virtuous way you treat them. Care also about more than a single bottom line. Care about the social, the spiritual, the environmental impact. Bake that into and again, we're trying to reach the faith-driven world. So we're not trying to preach to anybody other than our own kind. If you get what I'm saying here, I'm saying, look, if you claim to be this kind of a person, if you claim to be kind of that red letter, I follow the words of Jesus sort of thing, then doggone it, live up to it, even in your business world. So how do we mobilize faith-driven entrepreneurs and faith-driven investors to support those emerging entrepreneurs? That's one goal, more free and virtuous society. But secondly, how do we use business as a way to lift people out of poverty? And I really do believe that Reg CF is the answer for our marginalized communities, especially African American communities. And to the extent that we can begin to help those communities understand, listen, you can support your own entrepreneurs with as little as $250. So one of the things that I say that makes us unique is we have intentionally built into EquityVest a desire to help marginalized communities with lower raises. Because the whole way Reg CF works is that portals get paid a certain percentage on the monies that are raised. In our case, the lower amounts up to about 500,000, it's a 6% success fee. Well, if you're dealing with for example, if you're dealing with an inner city company that's trying to raise $100,000 for a drywall, business, well, do the math on that. The math that's only $6,000 that's coming back to the portal. No portal in this business can succeed on those kinds of things. However, because of who we are and how we have designed ourselves, we're doing some extra efforts. We're still a long ways from getting there, but we're working to be able to help those smaller raises and building some tools into our system to
Yeah. So
a long ways to go, but that's our heart. So and Karl, one last thing, let me leave it at this. We are the only Reg CF portal owned by a not-for-profit. That's one of the things that makes us absolutely unique. It took FINRA a little extra time to understand that, because I got to brag on this right now, and it's also a shameless plug.
Go ahead.
For our fundraise, but we've been in existence 3 years. The first year was all about getting the approval with FINRA. We finally got it, and so now we're not quite at 2 years. We've got our first couple of offerings on the site. 3 more should go live within the next week or so. But we've spent $400,000 to get to the point we are today. That's unheard of. There's no other portal out there. I don't believe that can say that. If you look at WeFunder and Start Engine, I believe by this time they had both raised 5 million, 6.2 million to get to the point they're at. We've done it this way because all of our funding has come through donated dollars made as loans through donor advised funds. So we're basically saying to the community out there, look, you've got donated dollars that you're putting into play. Why don't you put some of those donated dollars into a mechanism that will become its own economic engine, won't need your donations forever. We'll pay those back to your donor advised fund, and help us start this Reg CF portal that has the heart of a not-for-profit and the mind of a business that is going to work hard at making capital available to lower end kinds of things as well as high end kinds of things. So that's kind of our journey. That's who we are. That's what we're doing. And I never dreamt it would be this hard.
Yeah. It's like any great entrepreneurial adventure. If you truly understood how hard it was going to be, the chances are you wouldn't undertake the journey, because it is often painful. It's usually very, very slow, and you get all kinds of interesting pushback and challenges from people who actually should be helping you along the way, which is hard to understand. Let me do a little background to give people who may not be familiar with Reg CF. Back in the Great Recession in 2007, 2008, the economy went down in a big way, and the government started clamoring for new jobs, and they turned to the small business sector, which always historically has been the supplier of the greatest amount of new jobs. And they said, hey, you guys, crank it up. Let's get to work. Let's create some new jobs out there. And all the small businesses are looking around at each other going, yeah, but we don't have enough money to go out and expand to new facilities, hire new people. And finally, the feds, under great pressure, realized that all the securities laws, which had started way back in the Great Depression of 1929 with the Securities Acts of 33 and 34, had worked over time to basically keep small businesses, people who are not wealthy, out of the capital industry. It became an old boys club of rich people who were the only ones who were allowed to play. And even though there were exceptions and little loopholes in there where you might work with non-wealthy people, practically you couldn't get it to work. So what happened in 2012, 4 years late, they passed the Jobs Act, which says we're going to change all the securities laws and we're going to allow non-wealthy people. And when I say non-wealthy, as they define it, 90% of the people in the United States as a couple and 95 to 97% as individuals qualify as non-wealthy. They simply don't have that much income. They don't have that much net worth. And they were essentially legally and practically banned from making investments. And worse yet, because of this accumulation, aggregation of wealth in large amounts with rich people, it almost never got to the small business, the mom and pop business that creates those jobs, that is, makes up Main Street, that is, virtually every small business you know is going to fall in this category. They weren't getting the money. It was all going to New York City, to Wall Street, to strange and bizarre things like derivative loans and funds and weird stuff. So they passed the law in 2012, but they gave it to the Securities and Exchange Commission, said, propose the rules to implement the law. And they drug their feet for 4 years and no excuse for taking that much time. A lot of the states, like my state in Colorado, I helped get local crowdfunding laws passed because the door had been opened and we wanted to get our foot in the door and hold it open. And so finally in 2016, the law took effect. And everybody's talking about how this is going to allow so much new money to come into small business because 97% of the population now can participate. And to your point, Tom, this is, in my mind, the perfect tool for micro businesses, marginalized businesses, businesses run who do not have the same statistical access to capital, whether it's people of color, it's women-owned businesses, whoever it may be, because statistically, 98% of the time it's going to old white guys like me, although I still don't seem to get my fair share, but that's a story for another day. But they changed the laws, and the thing is, I have tried since the law passed to be as much of an advocate to explain, educate, and come up with better and better ways of working with crowdfunding. And I'm constantly frustrated because too often the default is that this is just another way for a wealthy person to invest. And they pitch the deals, they craft the deals, they structure the deals, they pick the businesses for funding that would appeal to an angel investor because they're high ROI, they're high growth companies that they can tell somebody they're going to get fabulously wealthy sometime in the future. And that has little or nothing to do with the vast majority of businesses in the United States. And it certainly is uncommon in startup businesses, which is where a lot of our focus is today. And I have worked in the past with some local churches on their business as mission programs. And one of the key things that they put on the table is that self-worth typically starts with your job, that if you're employed and you're working, you have a way out of poverty, you have a way to do this. And I see crowdfunding as a way for somebody to create their own job, so to speak, build their own business if they can't find the job that's going to get them out of poverty because it's not offered because they don't have the skill or training and they don't have that 4-year degree, which doesn't seem to make a difference much anymore, that they can go out and raise money and start their own business. So we've seen around the world new trends, growing trends of microfinancing, different types of financing, and so forth. And again, part of the problem is that too often these are debt financing which doesn't really address the risk associated with starting up a new business or a small business. So crowdfunding has all the potential in the world to have all this impact. Where one of the original economists predicted as much as $1 trillion a year could go into small businesses on Main Street. And it still needs to be equitably divided or available to everyone. That's still another challenge, which we're going to talk about more here in a moment. But Regulation CF is the federal version. You have, I believe, 40 some states have an interstate version, and this allows everyone to invest. There's restrictions on what they do, how they do it. There's all kinds of red tape. The government requires you to fill out more forms to make a $100 investment in a small business in your neighborhood than it does to buy a $65,000 truck or a $400,000 or $500,000 house. So the inequities will continue to chip away. But that brings us to the point, Tom, where you're trying to work with new businesses, small businesses, marginalized businesses. How do you go about doing that? How do you let them know that you're here, that you're open for business? How do you help them understand that this is a tool for gaining access to capital?
Primarily through personal networks, because Karl, and you get this, not all of the Reg CF platforms are niche platforms, but there are some niche platforms out there. So you get the really big ones like WeFunder, which is just it's for anybody and everybody sort of thing. And then you get some of the others that I won't mention their name necessarily, but you've got others that I would say are niche in that they're highly vetting their offers. And so basically what they're catering to is the traditional investor, the traditional VC person. They're basically saying, look, we reject 9 out of 10 offers. So the only offers on our site are the top 10% you can be really sure. So that's a form of niche in there. We we have chosen to be a niche sort of thing. And by that I mean we're trying to identify with people who identify strongly with their faith. And we're trying to say, look, we've got this site that, we're not, there's no litmus test, there's no statement of faith that has to be signed or anything, but we're saying is, look, hey, those of us who believe that our faith ought to animate our decisions, ought to factor into certain things. Well, here's a place. And what we will do is we will try to reach as many faith-driven individuals as we can to create as big a database of faith-driven investors. And we're not saying, we're not telling them, here's the litmus test of how faith-driven you are. That's not it. You get to decide that. And then we're also going out there to a lot of the networks. There's a whole group out there called Faith-Driven Investors, Faith-Driven Entrepreneurs. There's these kind of Shark Tank sort of things like Lion's Den that happens in Dallas, and their pitch events. There are incubators like Oceans out in Cincinnati that's working, and they're all the same thing. They're all faith-driven individuals saying, hey, we want to create this ecosystem that's helping faith-driven entrepreneurs and connecting them to faith-driven investors. So it only makes sense to us to embed ourselves in those networks, to say to them, look, crowdfunding is probably going to be a pretty significant option it's going to be an option for 90% of the companies, because in the same way that only 10% of the American population qualify as accredited investors, only 10% of the offerings out there are those investors are invested in. So you got 90% of the population who can't invest in privately held companies, and you got 90% of the companies out there that are ignored by these VCs. I mean, to me, it's like, come on, country. This is a no-brainer. This is how do you mobilize the 90% that have not been able to invest and connect them to the 90% who have not been investable up to this point. And I say that kind of jokingly, and you understand this too. The problem is the 90% doesn't even know they're the 90%. I mean, the 90% doesn't even know what an accredited investor is.
Yeah,
It worked. So since the stock market crash happened, the SEC did find a way to shelter and shield the average person from being taken advantage of the way that they were way back then. So I'll admit that that's true. But in the meantime, the average person, uh, heck, I found that the average person who qualifies as an accredited investor in that top 10%, they don't even know that that they qualify as an accredited investor. It's like there's a very
yeah.
small portion of the country that actually knows who can and can't invest in privately held companies. Anyhow, I digress. But
No, but I will take off on that. Do you have your mic open on your computer or something? Because I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
oh,
Um,
let me see.
no, you turned your mic off entirely there.
So,
Um,
all right.
But yeah, so to this point, I wrote kind of my own manifesto on why crowdfunding isn't all that it has the potential to be. Published that back in LinkedIn in December, and I've shared it with a number of people, which has gotten me invited onto some new panels where I think I'm going to be the contrarian in the room. But I take the point that crowdfunding was not created for angel investors. It was not created for wealthy people. It was intended to allow, by law, non-wealthy people to participate. And non-wealthy people fall into different socioeconomic platforms. There are some people who are doing well, who are making 100,000 plus a year, but don't qualify as
Mhm.
an accredited investor. But the vast majority of people are making under $100,000 a year, and they don't think of themselves as investors. They don't get up in the morning and open the Wall Street Journal. And until recently, there wasn't even a place they could go to look for crowdfunding campaigns. But now with King's Crowd and some other publications coming out where you can see the different crowdfunding campaigns, but again, and I've spoken to this, if the whole offering is designed solely for wealth building, strictly with an ROI premise, then the average person is going like, well, I've got $100. If I invest $100 and this thing goes wild, it goes 10 times. I got $1,000. Okay. That won't put your kid in college. That's not going to buy you that new truck. It may not even make your monthly payment on your house. And so when we talk about small dollar investing, it takes on a completely different character. It's like the laws of physics change as you get into the nano size away from standard molecular sizes. So does the capital industry and investing in how you do this. One of the few people I know who I think has a legitimate model for wealth building through crowdfunding is Devin Thorpe with SuperCrowd. And he basically advocates for a person making $100 a month investment into different small businesses month after month after month. And he is convinced that in his model, you'll be able to match or exceed the return you would get 6% on Wall Street over a 20-year time frame. And I always laugh when I have to use that phrase because every business broker talks about how Wall Street outperforms and they pick a 20-year time frame. But if they move it 6 months either way, it might be a little bit different in the outcome you get. Timing is very, very important there. But Devin believes in this. He comes at this from the word impact. And impact crosses over, Tom, into what you're talking about. There's going to be places where there's clear overlap, and there's places where it may have two different definitions. But he recognizes that, and he has set up his own investment club called the Impact Cherub Club. and they won't look at a deal that has a minimum investment requirement of more than $100. Because he believes if you don't get that minimum investment down to $100, the average person simply can't look at it. It takes too many people out of the game before the game even starts. So it's an interesting thing to see different people coming at this from different directions. But I use the joke that if I walked into a coffee shop and I shouted out, Joe, Joe, everyone whose name is Joe would turn around and look at me. But if I shouted investor, investor, no one would turn around because no one in that coffee shop walks around thinking about themselves as an investor. And so when I wrote my little manifesto about how everybody's pointing to wealthy people for wealthy people about gaining wealth and being completely off target on what crowdfunding is all about, I took a picture of a guy with a bare shoulder and I put a tattoo on it. And I put investor in a heart on his arm because nobody gets an investor tattoo. Nobody, Kansas City Chiefs, great for winning the Super Bowl. We have Kansas City Chief fans everywhere. I'm from Kansas City area originally, so I still have a place in my heart for the Chiefs, even though they've been beating the hell out of my Broncos for so long. It's hurtful to talk about. But people don't think of themselves as investor; they think of themselves as consumers. And so I work in designing crowdfunding campaigns, both for Reg CF and interest rate campaigns. And I always start with the customer as the most likely investor candidate. And that package has to have consumer attributes, characteristics. And I'm going to be speaking on this at the Super Crowd 2024 program on April 17th and 18th. And um, I'm going to be designing crowdfunding campaigns for the customers of the small businesses, which takes a different look because a customer says, I want a good deal, I want a bargain. They're not trying to get wealthy, they're just trying to save money because that money's coming out of a household budget. It's not coming out of a discretionary set of dollars for investing to make more money or put their money to work. And so I look at this way differently than most of my colleagues. And I battle with a lot of the people who are advisors in crowdfunding because they're all talking about angel investment style deal structures, pricing, the whole 9 yards. And I want something that gives some immediate value in the form of products or discounts or something else to the consumer that they can control and take home today while we put into that package a little bit of equity, which could ultimately build wealth, help that business move forward, and even pay for all the free products and discounts that the person got. So I have a totally different mindset on this, and I've been posting up on my newsletter on LinkedIn, my instant funding newsletter, and I'm going to be constantly banging on everybody else that if you want to really realize potential of crowdfunding to make it a democratization of the capital industry where 100% of the people have a way they can participate that benefits them, then we got to rethink all this. And uh, everything you're doing, Tom, I totally appreciate and applaud and accolades to you for all the work you've done. And you've got a whole lot of work to go. So uh, I see a lot of businesses, and as you described it earlier, when you're in that bottom 10% in the poverty, it's like every rule's turned against you. There's like nothing working for you. And where they talk about launching a rocket and you have to get out of the Earth's atmosphere at escape velocity. The air near the surface is the thickest, heaviest air that you have to get through. And in poverty, it's in my mind, it's the same way. If you're in poverty, your challenges, the barriers, everything seems to be 10 times greater than it is if you can just get a little bit higher. You can get your head above the water or out of the atmosphere a little bit. So, what do you think you need to do to help move that along? Or is it education? Is it whatever is on your mind there?
Well, and I love what you're doing as well. The longer I'm in this, the clearer it gets to me. I mean, I think you stand back and you can look at this with clear eyes, and it's very predictable, um, how things are going in Reg CF. There are those that are part of the traditional VC crowd, angel investors and so forth, who who have begun to see, this could be another layer of profit for us. And so it doesn't take any kind of a degree in economics to think that that group will then begin to
Sure.
look at Reg CF platforms that they can optimize for their crowd. And I say, good for you, because okay, go for it. But to your point, I want to look up this Devon guy, Devon Thorpe. But to your point, there are other portals that get what you're saying, and those portals are trying to figure out. And here's my comparison: that up until crowdfunding, everybody in business was trying to catch a whale, and now that crowdfunding has come into place, the the average company is not fishing for whales anymore. You're fishing for tilapia, a whole bunch of tilapia. And just think about that for a second, Karl. The whole process, everything that you need to surround yourself with to support you in whaling is huge. It's big. It's necessary. It's only done by a few, and all you need is one. Whereas tilapia, you just need a little something. You need a fishing pole and a bobber. And if you can get 25 fishing poles and 25 bobbers, then your odds start going up. So that image in my mind is what I'm trying to help entrepreneurs see, is that, listen, this is fundamentally different. You are fishing for tilapia. The average investment over all platforms over all time is just under $1,500. So come on now, um, and the motive behind that person writing a check for $100 and that person stroking a check for $25,000 is fundamentally different. So I like the way you say it. So, and I get what you're doing. You're saying, listen, the average investor sees themselves as a consumer. So it would make sense that if your product or service has a consumable piece to it, add that as a perk. And it's not, that's just good business, because you are appealing to this motive within them. Whereas you and I both know the the VC, they don't need perks. They got they've got money to buy all the perks they ever want. What they're looking for is a 20x return. Period. End of conversation. So let me share it this way. So I think the other thing that has to happen in this space is more guys like you need to keep talking to to the retail investor,
But
the average person. More folks like King's Crowd, more folks like Devon, who begin to help that the 90% of the population get it. I do believe that as that begins to happen, it will snowball, and that the crowd will talk to itself. But I think the other thing that you have to look at is there anybody out there in the crowdfunding world who's figured it out? And I say the answer is yes. The number one crowdfunding portal that has gotten this to the point that they have catapulted themselves as a competitor in the whole industry is Angel Studio.
I'm not familiar with them.
So
So
Angel Studio. So if and this is why I think it's so beautiful. Angel Studio is a group of faith-based folks that are behind the docu-series called The Chosen, which is the whole story of the life of Jesus that's streaming. They were the ones that were behind the Jim Caviezel movie that came out about human trafficking. They were behind Cabrini, the new movie that just came out about. I mean, these are movies that are competing with the major studios out there. And what they figured out was, and boy, I hope your audience can hear me on this because this principle is transferable. They knew that out in this country were a whole lot of people that could write $100 check that were sick and tired of the movies coming out of Hollywood. Okay, that's the average person. They didn't care if that person saw themselves as an investor or not. These are activist kinds of people that are saying, give us some better movies, give us some better entertainment. And Angel Studios said, I know what we can do. What we'll do is we'll crowdfund the distribution side of this thing, which is typically under 5 million, the kinds of movies that they're going for. We'll go out there and we will promote these movies to a base of faith and family friendly people whose only common denominator is give me some better stuff to watch. And they did it. And they have been able to fund a number of movies that are competing in the box office with the major studios, and they're doing it through, they're utilizing crowdfunding to do it. So what we're trying to do, what I am trying to help our entrepreneurs understand is that our platform is new. We don't have a ton of investors right now. We'll get those, those numbers will build over time. But even the platforms that have a ton of investors will project that at best will help you with maybe 25% of your raise. You have to,
25%. Yeah, the stats I've seen is it's closer to 5% that you have to bring 95% of the people to your platform through your own crowd, your own community. And this is one of the greatest challenges for a small business, where even with a customer focused or a customer designed investment package, is how many customers do you have? And do you know your customer? Do you have the ability to contact and promote to your customer? If you're running the local coffee shop, you may see the same people come in and buy that caramel mocha, whatever it is, every Monday morning. But do you have the ability to tell your story to that person that, hey, we have an opportunity for you to have a stake in this business, to help us be a small business in this community, to hire 20 people who are baristas behind the counter that pay their taxes and go to schools and do all these things. And so often, this is where the small business hits the wall because they don't have a large enough crowd that is at the beck and call that they've worked with and have ready to go. And setting that up takes time. My joke is that building a crowd is like planting a tree. The best one was planted 20 years ago. And since you're trying to raise money tomorrow, we're going to have some challenges on getting where we want to go. And so, yes, I agree. We're going to be building and training and letting people know how this works. And I'm trying to help design successful crowdfunding campaigns that can be used as show and tells and demonstrations for people who can't get there from here. And this is one of the statistical battles I fight all the time is you talk to an angel investor who wants to be a venture capitalist and they want these high rates of return, but over 60% of the businesses in the United States average like a 10% profit margin, which means that they can't give up 20% if they only have 10. And if they give up all 10, then there's nothing left for the people running the company. So you have to get more creative in what you give up since profit's not available. And one of those things is to work within the profit margin of your products and services, where you may have another 5-10% that you can give up. And you're now speaking to a consumer where they can understand the pitch. If I try to explain a 3-year, 5-year equity investment in the small business, by the time I get done, nobody in their right mind would invest in that business for a rate of return because it doesn't make any sense. If I can tell them that, hey, put some little money in here, we'll give you some free stuff that you can have today, come down, pick it up, and oh, here's discounts that you can get 100% of your investment back if you come and shop more in the future. Those are things we all understand. And then if it turns out that that stock's worth something or whatever they gave them as a form of security, then good for everybody. But I also joke that, if I ask someone, so I'm going to give you two choices. You can buy a lottery ticket. I think Mega Millions is now up around 700 and some $1 million that will be picked tonight or something like that. Or you can put $100 into a small business in your neighborhood, and they may pay you back sometime in the future. We're not sure when, we're not sure how much. Which of these two choices do you want? And invariably, the small dollar, small household budget person goes, I think I'll get a lottery ticket.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but uh, Karl, there's folks like you and myself. Um, I'm enamored by this space. We're living at a very unique time. Never in the course of modern history has this kind of investment been possible. And while I'm not a big fan of what the government typically does, I am impressed with what they have allowed through regulation crowdfunding. And what I feel that has happened here is they have deregulated. So again, the average entrepreneur, uh, the burden of all of this regulation falls on the funding portal. It falls on us. We're the ones that got to help, that have to help them. Now it's going to cost you, it's going to cost you 10 to 12 grand just to get everything done that you need to. There's no way of getting around that. But once that's done, the average person, the funding portal and the escrow and all that kind of stuff is sort of taken care of. And if FINRA has a problem, well, I shouldn't say that, but you know what I'm saying. So now I really do believe at some level, um, the message needs to get out to entrepreneurs. All right, now put your big boy and big girl pants on. Um, Nobody said raising money was ever going to be easy. Used to be impossible. You were categorically excluded. All right, so quit crying. Um, Now you need to figure out how to fish for tilapia. To your point, who are your customers? And if you're not thinking that way, if you're coming to us or anybody else thinking that somehow, some way, we have found 200,000 investors just ready to invest in your company, you are living in delusion. They're, they'd rather buy a lottery ticket. So get creative. You're an entrepreneur. Start thinking. One of the things we're doing as we onboard people now is we have a whole section in our online application that we're asking you to give us a guesstimate as to your number of contacts. And so we've got like about 6 or 8 categories. LinkedIn. Are you a part of associations or networks? What's your customer base? I mean, because what we're finding is that most people don't really think
I
about
don't.
the number of names and all that kind of stuff. But what we're saying is you've got to think about that right now. You've got to think about, what are your lists? How big is your Facebook, TikTok, Instagram? How big is your LinkedIn? How big and we just keep going and going and going and going. Because what we want to do is, at the beginning of this, we're wanting to spur their thinking that you probably know more people than you think. And that if you know those people and you get with and we can put them in contact with some people that can help them market their stuff, then you can work with the marketing team to begin um, to market to your crowd. And all of these things take time, they take energy, and I get it. That's the one thing entrepreneurs don't have. They don't have time, they don't have energy, they don't have money. But guess what? To do crowdfunding, it's going to take time, it's going to take energy, and it's going to take money. There's no getting around it. So,
Yeah, no, so this is one of the challenges I have found is the way I try to turn the thinking is I tell a small business owner, I ask them the question, "What's your most valuable asset?" And invariably they give me the wrong answer. I go, "Your most valuable asset is all the relationships you have with everybody you're working with, your customers, your vendors, your community, every civic organization you belong to, your faith-based organization." And if you think of these relationships as your greatest asset, then ask yourself, are they in a relationship where you are mutually supporting each other? And this is a new definition of community that I'm working on and helping other people build, which are people who have over time agreed tacitly or otherwise that they're going to support each other. They're going to hold each other up. And you see these in all kinds of different groups, but we haven't seen this come into crowdfunding yet. And this is going to be an extension of some groups of capabilities to be part of the crowdfunding. In some cases, I know people are working to create investor groups who are impact oriented or they're community oriented, looking at different ways of doing this and helping them understand that. Well, then the small business has to be able to access this community quickly, efficiently. That means setting up
yeah,
social media systems. It means having a customer relation management system. They can't do it by hand. You can't work with 1,000 investors with a spreadsheet. I've tried. It doesn't. It's way too much work. And one of the interesting things today, as you said, is that we're in a unique time where the internet now allows degrees of efficiency in working with a large community. If you were trying to do this even 10 years ago, it would have been a greater challenge than it is today. And with AI backing you up and helping you along, it's even easier than it was a year ago. And this
yeah,
allows you to create, build, and maintain relationships, which can include putting money into a business to help it move along, but they're not likely to put on their investor hat first and go, I'm coming into this to build wealth. All too often, they're saying, no, it's because this is where I buy my groceries, or this is the guy who fixes my car, or something like that. And oh, by the way, my cousin works there, or this guy sits on the Rotary Club or some other civic organization, and I know the person, and we all know who they are. We want them all to survive, we want them all to thrive. And in rural communities, in particular, where I've done a lot of work, every small business is hugely valuable to the economics of that community. You really cannot afford for these small businesses to fail. And we're seeing a lot of boomer businesses where the owners don't have a succession plan in place and they need for somebody to step in and take over that business, whether it's the employees or it's a young millennial who wants to be their own entrepreneur. So there's so many opportunities for people to start and grow a business, but they have to think that their relationships is a starting point. It may be the foundation for everything they do, whether that group started with a faith-based organization or their customer base, wherever. But if they don't understand all the work and the time necessary to start and maintain and track with the infrastructure behind it, they're not going to be successful in crowdfunding. It just you won't get there from here.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, um, one of the bedrock choices, decisions that we made was that we were going to be entrepreneur centric. In other words, our goal was to accept 90% of the companies that come to us. And obviously, there's certain things that we won't take on because of our Christian um, underpinnings and that in who we are. But that tends to be relatively few things, to be quite honest with you. And if you don't have a minimal viable product or service and that kind of stuff, there's certain things like that that will disqualify you. But what we're saying is, look, we want to give you every chance in the world to raise the money. And we're not going to say that this is faith enough. There's a part in the application that talks about, what is it that you're trying to do beyond the bottom line, and how do you fit with who we are and that kind of stuff. So we're not saying that we're going to judge that you're Christian enough or you're enough faith driven. That's not the point. You get a chance to tell your story, and the investor gets to decide that. The investor may decide, this person is more explicit in what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it and why they're trying to do it. Okay. And if that's your faith ROI, you decide that. Another one is going to be less so that way. They're going to say, I'm doing this because, and it may not be as explicit a reason. The investor gets to decide if that's enough. And then the same thing in terms of, is this a good deal or not? We're not here to tell you, this. We can't tell you that it's a good deal. Matter of fact, we got to tell you that it's probably a bad deal and you're going to lose all your money. So that's what we do. But you decide, and we're saying to the entrepreneur, come on, we'll help you. We'll do everything we can to help you get your offering up, to get all of the papers filed with the regulatory committee. Our motto is, we're with you every step of the way. I mean, we'll hold your hand. We won't carry you. We're not going to do that, but we will help you, and we'll connect you to some third parties that can help you do this and that and the other to get over the finish line. But we'll do everything we can to give you a shot to mobilize your crowd to come behind what you're doing, and to raise the capital that you need. So
I think that as a platform, that's really all you can do. As you say, you can't carry them over the finish line. If you did, you'd do maybe one, and then you'd be exhausted, and there wouldn't be any resources for anyone else. So it is a challenge in running an intermediary, a crowdfunding portal, to get the word out. Then you have to educate the businesses on what reality is all about. How do you successfully raise funding? And to me, there's lots of lessons that a small business can learn going through a crowdfunding campaign, because I think it changes their focus, changes their perspective, and it may encourage them to engage in some of these relationship building type of activities, understand where they fit in a community or groups of communities, which will all contribute both to the way they run their business, but it so greatly improves their ability to raise capital. We're coming up to the end of the hour. This is all recorded. So for those of you who may want to watch this in recording on LinkedIn or Facebook or other places, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But I have Tom's contact information here on the screen with EquityVest. Please reach out to Tom if you think you have a business that is going to contribute to the wealth of the world and make the world a better place. And Tom, last comments, last statements here before we call it a day.
Well, Karl, I appreciate you're right. You've been with us in every step of the way. Well, not every step. So you were with us in the early stages of this, and really grateful to get to meet you when we did. Love what you're doing. I hope you have great success in helping entrepreneurs and investors understand that what an incredible opportunity a regulation crowdfunding provides in the overall scheme of things. So I wish you the best. Thanks. Any of your folks out there have an interest in listing on EquityVest, give us a holler. If you've got some donor advised funds and would like to, we're trying to raise about $300,000 to kind of take us to the next level with EquityVest, to hire a couple of people and to really get traction. We're looking for some investors there as well. So you've got my email there. Contact us. Would love to follow up.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for being on the program here today. And All of you out there who are small businesses looking to raise capital, recommend you consider Tom's EquityVest platform as one of the ways to do that. For everyone who's out there helping small businesses raise capital, if you don't know about crowdfunding, you need to find out about it and understand how to help your clients go out and raise capital in a fashion that is different from and probably way more rewarding than what they've tried in the past. So thank you everyone for being in the audience today of this successful funding show. There'll be no show next week. This is a special edition here on Thursday with Tom because I'm working with the University of Denver to take a group of students in a course down to Belize where we're going to immerse them in doing business in a different style in a different country so that they can learn that the way we do it in the United States isn't the only way to conduct business. And so I'll be out of pocket all next week, but we will be back on April 2nd. We will have a guy who works with merger and acquisitions, business succession planning, and so forth as our guest. And there'll be more information on the LinkedIn newsletter about that upcoming show. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, audience.